is the Frontrunner Ladder. This one is specifically designed for a Rav4. My Rav4 is a 2020 TRD. Frontrunner is notorious for not sending extra parts. And this one, unfortunately, does not have any pictures of those nuts and bolts. They're only identified by number. And unfortunately, a lot of these nuts and bolts are the same size and in similar fashion. So what I did was I laid them all out and identified them with numbers first. So take a screenshot of this. You will need it. It certainly helps identify which nut goes where, so you're not looking for it later. Again, some of these parts look incredibly similar, including those washers. The build starts out incredibly simple, so it's going to have you build the ladder portion first and then the install. So the ladder itself will be built separate and then it'll be put on at once. Now pay attention to where you're putting these brackets, because if you look right here, there is a hole right here, which is farther down, which is where one of the steps go. Now, if you put this step too high or too low, it probably doesn't matter much, but if you wanted it to look as it should, make sure you're putting these in the right direction. It'd be very easy to get them flipped. And when installing these steps, they slide in, and it's, again, pretty easy to make a mistake on this part. So just make sure the steps are going in the correct direction. Again, another mistake that would be very easy to make. Now, I usually don't suggest using power tools on things like this unless you must. And these screws that go in to these steps are not threaded. They're not pre-threaded. So you have to pretty much brute force them in, and a drill just did a better job. And here is the ladder all built. As you can tell, it's pretty much just a big erector set. Took me probably 15 minutes to put together. Very simple. And next step would be to get over to the Rav4 and install the bracket that goes in the inside door. Now, this is when things, for me at least, got a little confusing. So you install this bracket, and then it has you loosely place the built ladder on the vehicle. And the goal is to pretty much identify placement of that ladder before you start drilling holes, which makes sense. However, I had a lot of difficulty understanding the directions or instructions. Just some of the verbiage just didn't make a lot of sense to me, so this took me probably longer than it should have. For the most part, what you're doing is you're trying to line up the holes with the bracket on the inside, and once the bracket on the inside is lined up with the top of the ladder, in theory, then you can place your tape down and identify the placement. When I stood back, I couldn't help but look at it and think it was crooked. So I just kept going back and forth. That's probably me being OCD. I just felt like I was doing something wrong. Even in this video, watching it, looking at it, it looks crooked to me, but maybe I'm just crazy. And in all of my doubtfulness, I still identified where I should tape it. So I taped the bottom, and this is pretty much where the bracket is going to be drilled into the bottom of the door. So of course I got confused. That's what I do. And so I put the tape on the bottom instead of the top. So tape actually doesn't go on the bottom, it goes on the top, because that's obviously where you're going to drill. So I positioned the bracket, and with a Sharpie identified where I would be drilling. Just keep in mind, when you do this, make sure you put the rubber seal, that little rubber gasket, if you will, on the metal before you make the holes. I made the mistake of actually identifying where the holes go before putting that rubber bracket on, which changed the location of the holes. So I actually ended up having to make larger holes because I was stupid and didn't do it correctly. And be sure to wear your goggles. Lots of metal shards flying around. So there's a section of the instructions that tell you to remove the plastic to expose the metal. That to me is very confusing, because this is what they meant. They meant to remove the plastic backing panel, the back panel, to the door. So I got pretty confused on that, and obviously what they're trying to tell you is to expose the metal so that you can get to the other side of the door. You must have small hands and all the right tools to get behind this door, because it is a nightmare to get these bolts on the inside of this door. So I did come up with a few tricks. One of which is to tape your bolt to the inside of your wrench just with a piece of duct tape, so that when you stick that in, you won't lose your bolt, and you can then just screw from the outside. Remembering, of course, you need to put your washer on as well. So, well, this is when things went wrong. As you can tell, this is the inside of the door. There is the panel from the outside ladder, and that panel is supposed to connect to the interior bracket. And as you can tell, I removed the interior bracket. The screws that they give you, both of them stripped on me when I was trying to put them in. Now these screws, there's two of them, and they're supposed to go into a pre-threaded hole on that ladder bracket through the interior bracket, which is connected to the door. And needless to say, I closed up shop for the night and went inside and finished up the next morning. And as you can see, I successfully put on the ladder. However, the interior bracket still was not up to par. I did put 2 temporary screws in until I could fix it properly, which I will get to later. You can see the difference in what I had to use temporarily and what the actual screw was that they give you. There's not a lot of space in there, and the problem with it is you can't get a screwdriver vertical in that door. That door doesn't allow for vertical screw, and as you can tell from the instructions, it looks pretty horizontal. You know, when that door is closed-ish, it's supposed to allow for a kind of horizontal install, but that bracket does not go horizontal. It's angled to the point that you cannot get a screwdriver in there. And as a reminder, I unfortunately did not get it on video because I was on a time crunch with the sun going down, but there's double-sided tape on this portion of the ladder. So when you put it in, you have to get it right the first time. Otherwise, it will pull your paint off, God knows. So when you put this in, make sure you take your time and you do it correctly. Otherwise, you're going to get that tape on your paint in the wrong position and you have to pull it off. So I do suggest using 2 people if you can. One person at the bottom on the ground and one person on top, angling it correctly. Otherwise, you will be stuck putting this on the incorrect location and you won't be able to get your screws in. Okay, so how did I fix the interior bracket? I went to Ace Hardware and I picked up these bolts to replace those little screws that they give you. And the bolts are the same size, maybe a little bit longer. I did pick up a few different sizes just in case. Now, I did report this problem to Frontrunner, and it was forwarded to their engineers, but I don't know what that means, unfortunately. I took as many pictures and video as I could for them, so they're aware of that issue. But as you can tell, just from this video, that the bolts seem to be a much better choice, especially with it being pre-threaded. They go in. It's just the question of how they go in without being stripped. Now, another issue that I came across is the bottom of the ladder. There is no additional washer. It does not give you washers for that middle screw or bolt for some reason. So I would suggest putting an additional washer on that, which I did later. And another simple modification that I did was I added these soft strips at the bottom of the ladder, primarily because it was scratching up my plastic, at least the bolts were. So this just kind of helps keep things from getting too damaged over a period of time of it opening and closing. And if your question is whether or not the backup camera still works and gives you alarms, it does. I've tested it on multiple occasions, and it still notifies me when cars are behind me and everything else. So. Not make this easy.